Air. We can't see it, taste it, or smell it, and we can't even feel it unless the wind is blowing. But just like water, air is essential to life on Earth. At normal temperatures, air is a mixture of several different colorless, odorless gases. It is 78% nitrogen, represented by the letter N, a little less than 21% oxygen, represented by the letter O, and air also contains about 1% of certain other gases, including carbon dioxide, represented by the chemical formula CO2, that is made from 2 parts of oxygen, O, and just a single part of the element, carbon, C. One of the Earth's greatest natural cycles, the carbon cycle, depends on carbon dioxide obtained from the air, which is the same gas that makes the bubbles in carbonated soft drinks. The carbon cycle is actually based on 2 quite distinct but complementary biological processes, respiration and photosynthesis, that work together to support life on Earth. The first process in the carbon cycle, called photosynthesis, depends on sunlight. The word photosynthesis means to make from light, and it's a process that is only carried out by plants and algae, because they are the only creatures that can capture the energy of sunlight and use it to make food. During photosynthesis, carbon dioxide from the air and ordinary water are combined to make carbohydrates, which are energy-rich food materials that include the sugars that sweeten these cherries. So it's photosynthesis that makes our crops grow and that puts energy in the food we eat. But another amazing thing happens during photosynthesis too, which is that breathable oxygen is released back into the atmosphere whenever it occurs. In fact, all of the oxygen in our atmosphere is produced by the photosynthesis that takes place in plants and algae. So between making food for us to eat and filling the air with oxygen, it's easy to see why photosynthesis is so important. And since photosynthesis completely depends on the carbon dioxide in our air, it's easy to see why it's so important too. The other main process at work in the Earth's carbon cycle is called respiration, and it is the exact opposite of photosynthesis. Because during respiration, oxygen from the air and the carbohydrates that were produced during photosynthesis are combined inside of living cells to make water, as well as carbon dioxide gas, which is released back into the air. Respiration is really important because it's the main way that the energy stored in carbohydrates is freed up so that living things can use it to power their life processes. For example, respiration needs to take place in order for this giraffe to get energy from the leaves he is eating. That's the reason he needs to breathe in oxygen, and why he is breathing out carbon dioxide gas and water vapor. So as you can see, the carbon cycle basically shows how photosynthesis and respiration work together to capture and release energy, and how they make it possible for certain chemical elements essential to life, such as carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, to move back and forth between the air, living things, and the rest of the environment. The nitrogen cycle is another key life-supporting process that depends on a gas from our air. Nitrogen is another one of those elements that living creatures just can't do without. Because, for example, it's in DNA, the material that directs the activities of cells. And because nitrogen is a key ingredient of essential proteins too, such as those that are needed to make muscles and blood cells. Oddly enough, even though more than 3/4 of the Earth's air is pure nitrogen gas, hardly any living things are able to use it in that form. And that's why in our environment, the nitrogen gas from air is changed into something that creatures can actually use. In fact, that's what the nitrogen cycle is all about. The nitrogen cycle starts when one-celled nitrogen-fixing bacteria that live in the soil and in the roots of certain plants remove nitrogen gas from the air and combine it with hydrogen to make a usable nitrogen compound called ammonia. Then plants absorb the ammonia from the soil, allowing them to get the nitrogen they need for their life activities. And when animals eat plant materials, they obtain usable nitrogen from them. The nitrogen cycle is completed when decomposer and denitrifying bacteria cause the decay of dead plants and animals, which releases nitrogen gas back into the air once again. Now that we've learned why living things depend on the gases in the air, let's look at several different types of air pollution and find out how they are affecting life on our planet. The first type of air pollution that we're going to examine is called particulate pollution. Smoke is mostly particulates, which are tiny bits of burned, sooty material that float around in the air. People that inhale too many particulates can develop serious health problems, especially of the lungs and heart, just like cigarette smokers do. Particulate pollution occurs naturally on Earth when volcanoes erupt, or when lightning causes forest fires. But today, most of this kind of pollution comes from human activities, such as burning diesel fuel, gasoline, oil, coal, and wood. Particulate pollution is at its worst in big cities, especially in the world's developing countries, where controlling air pollution is frequently viewed as being less important than economic growth. Particulates can travel great distances, which shows that air pollution is truly a global problem. In fact, black soot from coal-fired power plants in China occasionally blows all the way across the Pacific Ocean and causes particulate pollution on the west coast of the United States. A second kind of air pollution results from the chemical oxides that are produced when fossil fuels are burned. These pollutants are sulfur dioxide, or SO2, and nitrogen dioxide, or NO2. When these chemicals mix with water vapor in the clouds, the rain that falls from them sometimes has so much acid in it that it's as sour as vinegar, and that's why it's known as acid rain. Acid rain can kill trees or slow their growth over very large areas of land, and it can even cause stone to erode. When acid rain falls on lakes and streams, they can become so acidic that aquatic creatures like fish will die. Fortunately, installing pollution control devices that remove the chemical pollutants from factory and vehicle emissions really helps reduce the problem of acid rain. An air pollutant called ozone is found in the clouds of smog that often hang over big cities. Ozone consists of 3 oxygen units linked together, and that's why it's represented by the formula O3. Ozone is created when chemical pollutants from the burning of fossil fuels combine in the presence of sunlight. Too much ozone in the air is harmful to living things. It can burn people's lungs. It can damage plants, and ozone can even cause rubber tires to fall apart. It's interesting to note that not all the ozone in our atmosphere is a harmful pollutant, because there is actually a protective ozone layer that surrounds our entire planet, many miles above the surface of the Earth, where it can't get into the air we breathe. This ozone layer is good because it absorbs the sun's most damaging rays, the kind that cause sunburns and skin cancer. About 30 years ago, scientists discovered that certain chemicals used in spray cans and refrigerators were causing a hole to develop in the ozone layer, allowing many more of the sun's dangerous rays to reach the Earth's surface, especially at the South Pole. Today, these harmful chemicals are illegal in most, but not all, countries of the world. The final kind of air pollution we're going to look at comes from greenhouse gases. These are gases that keep some of the warmth of the sun from escaping back into space, similar to the way a blanket keeps warmth in our beds. It may come as a surprise that the main greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide, CO2, which, as we have seen, is a natural ingredient of air that plays an important role in supporting life on Earth. The problem with carbon dioxide isn't that it's poisonous, it's that there is just too much of it in the atmosphere. In fact, a 30% increase in CO2 has occurred since the world's first big factories began to operate about 2.5 centuries ago. All of the extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has come mostly from the burning of fossil fuels and from the burning of wood, and farm fields too. Methane is the second major greenhouse gas in our atmosphere. The chemical formula of methane is CH4, which shows that it is 1 part carbon and 4 parts hydrogen. Methane is produced by the decay that occurs in places such as swampy wetlands and garbage dumps, and it's produced by the digestive processes of farm animals too. The natural gas we use for cooking and heating is mostly methane. Methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas, but it isn't affecting our environment nearly as much as carbon dioxide. That's because so much less of it is being released into our atmosphere. Most scientists think that the extra greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are what caused the Earth's temperature to increase by 1 degree Fahrenheit during the last century. And scientists predict that unless air pollution is reduced during the early decades of this century, our planet's temperature will continue to rise by between 2 and 11 degrees. The small temperature change that has already taken place is thought to be responsible for some of the climate-related changes that we are seeing today, such as more and heavier downpours of rain, shrinking glaciers, a rise in sea levels, longer ice-free periods on oceans, lakes, and rivers, and even heavier snowfalls. Of course, no one knows exactly what will happen if the Earth's temperature keeps on rising. But most scientists think that in the years to come, that we will have more powerful storms, more tornadoes, worse droughts, more severe hurricanes, heavier flooding, and greater loss of life, all of which are good reasons to get serious about reducing the emissions of greenhouse gases. Besides trying to cut CO2 emissions, scientists are also trying to find ways to actually remove some of the excess gas from the air. For example, they've found that planting trees helps because trees absorb carbon dioxide from the air when they carry out photosynthesis. Since most of our energy today comes from the burning of air-polluting fuels, one of the best ways to clean up our air is to switch over to alternative sources of energy that don't rely on burning anything, and, if possible, that are renewable too, meaning that the energy they produce comes from natural sources that we'll never run out of. For example, wind power. The movement of air supplies the energy for wind power. As the wind blows, the blades of the windmills turn, and electricity is generated. Since windmills make electricity without burning anything, there is no air pollution. And because the wind blows almost every day, wind power is renewable too. Hydroelectric power. Running water supplies the energy for hydroelectric power. Water rushing through dams like this one causes huge generators to churn out electricity. Hydroelectric power, just like wind power, doesn't cause air pollution and is renewable. Nuclear power. Atoms of uranium fuel nuclear power plants like this one. Uranium is the same material that is used to make atomic bombs, but at nuclear power plants, the explosive process is carefully controlled so that electricity can be made. Nuclear power plants don't cause air pollution and only release harmless steam into the atmosphere. But because nuclear power depends on uranium fuel, which we will run out of someday, it's a non-renewable source of energy. Solar power. The sun is the source of energy for solar power, Solar panels like these convert sunlight directly into electricity and are being used more and more often today to supply power to homes and buildings, while solar-powered heaters like this one capture the sun's energy and use it to heat water. Solar energy is both non-polluting and renewable. Geothermal power. Natural heat from deep within the earth supplies the energy for geothermal power. This is the same energy that makes geysers and volcanoes erupt and that causes water to boil up from the ground in hot springs. Geothermal energy, which is used both for heating homes and making electricity, is renewable and non-polluting too. Biofuels. Biofuels are special fuels for vehicles that are made from certain plants that are raised on farms. The main biofuel is ethanol, and it's in most of the gasoline we pump into our cars. In the USA, most ethanol is made from corn, but in other countries, ethanol is usually made from sugar cane. Soybean plants like these, as well as waste oils and several other plants that are rich in vegetable oils, provide raw materials for biodiesel, the other main biofuel. Biofuels are renewable sources of energy because the crops they are made from can be replanted year after year. However, biofuels do cause some air pollution because they need to be burned to release energy. But all in all, even though there are some real problems with biofuels, and with nearly all the types of alternative energy we've just looked at, they are still much kinder to the environment than fossil fuels, and will no doubt completely replace them someday. Since it may be a while before most of our energy comes from alternative and renewable sources, we can still help to reduce air pollution by not wasting energy and by practicing energy conservation. For example, lots of electricity made by pollution-burning fossil fuels would be saved if all the lights and computers that are on in the empty rooms of these buildings were turned off, and if all the old-fashioned incandescent light bulbs were replaced with more efficient compact fluorescent bulbs like this one. And a lot less gasoline would need to be burned if people started driving more fuel-efficient vehicles, and if more people traveled by mass transportation. The list goes on, and you can probably think of lots of other ways that people could stop wasting energy too. So remember, if you really want to help heal our planet, you can reduce air pollution just by being more careful about how you use energy.